You know that feeling, right? Where you totally get a big idea in your head, but when you try to actually use it in your day-to-day chaotic life, it just shatters? Well, that's exactly the problem we're digging into today. We're breaking down a spiritual lecture that tackles that exact frustration head-on.
And this question is the spark for everything. And seriously, who hasn't felt this way? It's that huge gap between knowing something and living it. The speaker uses this as a starting point to explore not just why we struggle, but what we can actually do about it.
So, first things first, we have to get on the same page about what the speaker even means when he says truth, because it's probably not what you're thinking, and it's the key to the whole puzzle.
And this is where it gets really interesting. The speaker says truth isn't some dusty old book of rules. Nope. He says it's the living, breathing, operational law of nature itself. It's always changing, always moving. So, to be in truth just means to be in harmony with that natural flow of how things work.
Okay, so how do we do that? Well, this is where most of us, let's be honest, trip up. We try to take this huge idea of truth and just slap it onto our messy lives, hoping for a miracle. The speaker says that's the wrong way to go. Instead, as you can see, the right approach is to just find one single correct thing to do, one little action, and you practice it over and over to build up that momentum.
Now, the speaker takes this very personal idea of misalignment and just blows it up. We're not just talking about one person's life anymore, we're talking about an entire nation. He zooms way out to diagnose what he sees as a massive societal sickness that's holding everyone back. I mean, that is a huge claim, right? He's not saying the biggest problem is economic or political. He's saying it's a problem of the mind, of the spirit. He zeroes in on this widespread culture of complaining and being dissatisfied as the real root of the country's problems.
And this slide, wow, it really lays out the wild paradox he's talking about. Back in the post-war days, when things were incredibly hard, he says people were just too busy making things better every day to complain. But now, in an age of unbelievable prosperity, even the smallest problems seem to cause this tidal wave of complaint. It's a total flip.
So, okay, if this sickness of complaining is real, what's the big deal? Well, according to the speaker, the fallout isn't just social, it's spiritual. It actually affects the kind of energy a society can tap into.
Wow, I mean, that's a pretty heavy image, isn't it? The speaker is basically saying this dark cloud of negativity is like a shield, and it's blocking what he calls heaven's power from getting through to the people. It's like a self-inflicted wound.
So what he's really saying is this. Think of heaven, or the natural order, or whatever you want to call it, as this supportive energy in the universe. It's there to help people who are trying, who are putting in the work. But if a whole society is just focused on complaining, it's like they're unplugging themselves from that power source. They're choosing to be weaker.
And just when you think the scale can't get any bigger, it does. The speaker doesn't just stop at diagnosing the problem. He frames it inside this massive historical and spiritual mission that he believes has been forgotten or ignored.
So the speaker puts forward this idea that the Korean people have this unique role as humanity's parents. Their destiny, he says, is to help the entire world. But it's not about being in charge. It's about empathy. It's about feeling the world's pain. From this point of view, even traveling abroad isn't about having fun. It's about going out to see and understand the world's suffering so you can actually do something about it.
Okay, now we get to a really controversial part of his analysis. And it's very important to stress that this is the speaker's specific take on things. He argues that men did their part, they used their strength to build the country's foundation, and they succeeded. But he claims women, whose role was to use knowledge to develop wisdom and guide society, failed to step up and fulfill that role, and that's what led to the imbalance we see today.
So who does he blame for this? Well, he points the finger directly at spiritual and religious institutions. He claims that when women went looking for guidance, these places didn't teach them how to find wisdom inside themselves. Instead, they were taught to worship external things, like statues. And in his view, that was a huge mistake that stopped the country's spiritual growth in its tracks.
All right, that was a lot of diagnosis, right? A lot about what's gone wrong. So what's the fix? This brings us to a super practical idea he calls the 70% rule. And this chart really explains it perfectly. He's saying any real change is a slog at the beginning. That first 30%, that's the hard part. It's when you're pushing and pushing, but not seeing huge results yet. The real magic happens when you hit the 70% mark. That's the tipping point, where suddenly everything you've been working on gets its own momentum and starts carrying you.
And this is exactly where he says so many of us give up. We do a little bit of work, things get a little better, and we think, great, I'm done. But that's just the start. We mistake that initial progress for the finish line. The real, lasting change, he says, only happens when you push all the way through to that 70% breakthrough.
Okay, so if we need to push to 70%, who's going to lead the charge for an entire society? That's a huge task. Well, the speaker has a very specific answer.
And his solution is this. It all has to start with the nation's elders. He's calling for a whole new movement, and he says the generation with the life experience and wisdom to get it started is the one that has to step up and lead.
And he's not being vague here. He's talking about the baby boomers who've retired, the scholars, the intellectuals, basically the people who've put in their time building careers and are now free. They have the wisdom and the time to guide everyone else. The whole point is to get society back in balance, where the elders, the youth, and the children are all playing their natural parts.
Ultimately, after all of that, all the big ideas and complex theories, it all boils down to this one simple, powerful Korean phrase, Uri Gatsi Ga Jago. It means, let's go together. It's a call for unity, a call for patience, a recognition that nobody can fix this alone, and it's not going to happen overnight. It's a journey everyone has to take side by side.
And that brings us right back to the very beginning. Back to that initial question about your messy life. The speaker's entire philosophy is about the power of one small step. So let's bring it all home. Forget about saving the world for a second and just ask yourself, what is the one small, correct thing you can do right now, today, to bring a little more harmony into your own world?